for trans community to find a safe space is so important that we've seen a lot more loyalty when a trans person finds a safe space, a safe manager, and a safe team to work with. We've seen them go really all out and actually contribute so much more to the organization. So I think trans community is a great contributor to the corporate India. It's just a little time before we, as a society, even understand and recognize that.
There has been much talk about diversity and inclusion in the workforce, but how much of that translates for the transgender community? Often abandoned by their families and robbed of their dignity and livelihood, transgender people are forced to beg and or become sexual workers to make ends meet. It is to ensure a better socio-economic standing for trans people that Neelam Jain started Periferry, an organization that works to skill and find employment solely for the trans community, and in the process help corporates and startups diversify their workforce by supporting the LGBTQIA+ inclusion. Since its inception in 2017, Periferry has helped place over 190 trans people and upskilled over 300, and worked with companies such as Wipro, Accenture, HP, Goldman Sachs, and many others to sensitize their work culture. As always, I'm your host Mahati Rangarajan, and you're listening to Maharani Talks, available on all major podcast platforms, so don't forget to follow us. So let's get started. Hi, Neelam. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here today. Thank you so much for having me.
It's equally my pleasure. I don't know if you've read the news that recently, the Karnataka has become the first state government, to reserve 1% of government jobs for the transgender community. It must be really heartwarming to hear such news, especially given the kind of work that you do, right?
Absolutely. And we've heard this a lot as to whether we need reservation or not. But the state of the transgender community in India is not equal. The community is still striving for so many basic rights, right? And in such a scenario, any state coming up with such a regulation is brilliant. And I definitely think we should increase as it goes, and a lot more states adopting it as well would be a great place to begin.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, earlier, the Kochi Metro, right, hired some transgender people. It was a failed experiment, I think, because they didn't realize just giving jobs is not going to solve. It just solves 1/4 of the problem, I guess. I mean, the ground realities is quite stark. And even recently, a couple of months back, Chennai Metro also, hired some transgender individuals. Whether it's a Chennai Metro, some say it's a PR activity, some say it's like it's a good move in the right direction. So what has been your experience with government organizations? Do you think more such initiatives should happen, and why certain experiments fail, what they can do? Have you yourself worked with government organizations?
Yeah. So this is something that I've always believed in, because Periferry was a pioneer in itself. So any organization, any institution that is pioneering an initiative for any marginalized community faces a lot of obstacles, faces a lot of challenges. And all of that happens because maybe we're making decisions without involving people from the community in our decision making. And I think precisely that's what's happened, where Kochi Metro could have had great intentions and the willingness to really make the right move. But the whole point perspective about trans issues are not just about getting jobs, but sustaining people around you, accepting housing, and so many other things, right?
Yeah.
And I saw that in our intervention with Chennai Metro. So Perifery was one of the organizations that was involved in the whole employment intervention with the Chennai Metro. And there were several other NGOs that were also a part of it. And that was handled in a much different way. So the Metro didn't say that, hey, we know what we need to do. So they came to us and they were like, tell us how we can do this right. And that's what really makes a difference, because you need to work with the community, you need to work with organizations that work in this space. So we had many interventions to actually make this sustainable. And obviously PR and stuff comes with it, but I think that was, it made a massive impact, and we saw a lot more other government spaces kind of opening up opportunities for the community. So I think it was a win-win in that case. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's wonderful that Periphery aided in that. How has it progressed with the Chennai Metro? How have they been doing?
So for a change, because the trans community is always viewed with the lens of only trans women. There are trans men and other gender non-binary trans persons also who exist. So within the Chennai Metro, we had a combination of both trans men and trans women as a part of it. Most of whom we've been able to retain till date. We did have like about two dropouts in the overall numbers that we had, but I think that was just a normal case scenario, the kind of attrition that is there in these kind of jobs, any which ways. But the organizations that were involved took care of the timings that actually work for communities. People who lived in far off areas and didn't have a space to kind of live over there, they were deported in other metro stations. I think all of those things, and I think that intervention has been great. Now, what we're progressing towards is actually ensuring there is a growth in this job, and we're not just saying that okay, you've gotten a job and this is enough. There should be growth in any job that we do, so we're working towards ensuring that people are able to move a scale and a level up higher in the next couple of months. Yeah.
And that's exactly what Periphery does, right? It's not just that you find jobs for the trans community. You do a more wholesome aiding the process in the sense that, you find them, you train them for it, and you find the job that fits their interest.
Yeah.
You also sensitize the companies that, that are hiring them. So how difficult has it been to adapt a company and especially the people involved to change their work culture to, have more inclusion? How hard has that been in your experience?
I've always felt like this is like an arranged marriage, and you're getting two parties together that probably just don't know or understand each other as well, right? And there is immense amount of work that goes at both sides. And I call this an arranged marriage because these are two worlds that are coming together, and the union of it is super important, and you need to work on it so much even after marrying both the parties, right? There's so much work that happens even after placing a trans person in an organization. So while we take care of things like, training a trans person so they're able to deliver on the job, I think sensitizing employees is highly important, and which is a core focus area for Periphery. And this just can't be a superficial level of acceptance where the employees, our co-workers are just like, take care, I mean, someone's coming now, we have to accept because the leaders want it that way. It can't be that way, because the person who comes in can sense, right, when you're feeling accepted or when you're not accepted.
Yeah.
So it's a very deep rooted, genuine inclusion that happens, and that takes a lot of time, because even as people, we've seen so much conditioning, and we've been conditioned to seeing trans people a certain way. So kind of weeing that out takes a lot of time, and Periphery spends at least a couple of months before we can even place someone in an organization. So deep amount of work with managers, with leaders, helping them understand, how we really need to broaden our perspective, and how at the end of the day this opportunity could really change a person's life. So and we all need to equally contribute in that. So yeah, and we have our own ways of doing this. We have workshops, carnivals, and one-on-one interventions that really go on even pre and post someone's placement. So until date, we've roughly sensitized over 22,000 corporate India employees in that effort.
Oh, that's amazing. And that sensitization is not just for, the upper management, right? It has to start from every tier of the company. It could be people they interact with on a daily basis.
Absolutely. And just anyone who walks inside the office. I mean, you wouldn't want to be held at the security check like longer than how anybody else is held just because you're a trans person, or you wouldn't want to be frisked excessively or asked excessive questions. And all of that means that we need to sensitize our security folks, we need to sensitize our admin, even the housekeeping staff. Sometimes we may just end up staring a person for like 5-10 seconds longer, and that can really make a person very uncomfortable. I mean, if I'm entering an office space, I wouldn't want people just staring up and down, right?
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. It like you said very rightly, it requires sensitization at different levels itself, and especially for trans people who are out and who are visibly out there, it's so much more important for them to be feeling safe and included.
Yeah. And, when you say sensitization, you mentioned it has to be equally about the trans individuals. They need to be sensitized as well. So, what kind of, training or skills that you impart, and how easy is it for them to do the transition? Are they like, game for it, or do they struggle?
Yeah. So first things first, I mean, Periphery receives applications from a very diverse range of trans persons, right from those who come with great education experience, who could very well just walk into any corporate job, to those people who may not have experience as well. So I would say the ratio is about 60% of those who have education, and then maybe about 40% who don't, and we need to do a lot of work with them in building their capacity. So, and the 40%, we have our own range of offline and online training programs. We've also just set up our own very first residential training center called Transin in Bangalore right now. So we're ensuring that we're working on English, communication, soft skills, basic digital literacy. All of that equips people to a whole range of jobs, and these are just basic skills that are required for any job, whether you're going for a HR or a basic ops level job, admin job, etc. 20 30K per month. These skills are non-negotiable. So we have about 2 to 3 months training program that is suited for people.
Okay.
We invite people into our campus and ensure that this is not just professional skilling, right? You're changing probably a whole lot of personal attributes of a person. I mean, you're helping them evolve themselves. So bringing them to our campus is to really help that person see a new space, feel a lot more confident, and increasing that self-esteem is so important, because as a society we've literally crushed the trans community. So coming to a space where they feel liberated and then professionally training them is the most important thing for us. So those kind of interventions are what we're really focusing on. But we've increasingly seen that in the last couple of years, there are so many young, very well-educated trans people who are reaching out. They're fresh out of even colleges like IIM, IITs, and who are just like, I know there are organizations now who can support me. So I don't think only begging or sex work is an option for me. I'm going to actually be myself and grow in the society just like anybody else.
I rightfully said. Do you follow up with them even after months or so after they've been placed? What do you have to share about how they progress in the jobs and in their lives?
Yeah. So I mean, very technically put, we do have like a 6 months post placement follow up process. So basically, if someone's placed today, then 6 months from now until then, we will be following up with them in person, phones, emails, etc. All of that, which is a part of our process. But I think beyond this, the way Periphery team and all of us are just very intuitively functioning is, we have our own support circles. So community members who come together in their training programs become like each other's massive support. And that kind of, lifts a huge amount of, I would say, when people start to support each other, when your peers start to support each other, that really helps each other quite a bit. When one person gets a job in a corporate, they're able to tell five others that, hey, this is how I'm handling this and that. And that, I think, has really worked out very well for us. We have these group meetups that usually happen over the weekends. And those kind of things really help people from the community. But having said that, I don't deny the fact that there is more and more intervention required. Even in just the past 1 2 weeks, we've had two people commit suicide who are transgender people.
Oh,
One person was very famous. She's from Kerala, name's Ananya.
yeah, I read about it.
Yeah. And then another one was someone we knew of our training programs, and she was doing really well. Like she was working at a leading corporate. She was a part of our Revive training program last year. And the past year, very, I think from a professional standpoint, that she was doing great. But I think having that personal touch is so much more important, because social circles that trans community members have may be very, very limited. You and I may have friends and families and so many friends of friends, etc., to reach out to,
Yeah.
and so many things easily accessible, right? But it becomes so much more important for trans persons to have those tight knit circles that they can reach out through support.
Yeah. That's really sad to hear about that.
Yeah.
going back to why you first started this. You were working as a financial analyst at Goldman Sachs, and you had like analyst impact fund, right? That you brought about this idea, right?
Yeah.
And though it didn't sail through, you were still passionate about the idea.
Yeah.
What made you take that step?
I think one is you're very young and you're very like optimistic about a lot of things in life. So I was just about 22, and I think for me at that age and at that point in my life, I was just like, if I cannot do this within the company, maybe I just exit and try this on my own. And they say that ignorance is bliss. I didn't know what that would really translate into. I was just extremely optimistic that I can really work on this. It's only when I got into it and I started working on it that I realized how challenging it was. So I think it was a lot of optimism, and I think I was deeply involved in the community by then. It wasn't that I quit my job and then started working with the community. While I was at Goldman already, I was meeting people from the trans communities, I was understanding their lives, spending a lot of time on the ground, right? And a part of me was kind of attached there. And I realized that I wasn't as excited as for my financial analyst job. It paid me well, but it didn't bring that excitement that I felt I could have in the development sector, and especially working with trans communities. For a lot of us, working with or understanding the lives of trans community members, kind of instigates a lot of sympathy. But for me, that really moved very quickly because I could see and I could work with the community in a very different light, and actually just seeing them as people, just like you and me. And it's just that there was a lot more disparity that someone like me could really work on as well. So I really think I have learned a lot more from the community than I could have possibly ever given back.
Okay.
And our work is still just building. We may have completed 4 years and done whatever in terms of numbers, but I think there's so much work to be done in this space, and we still have a very long way to go.
Was there anyone personally that you knew from the trans community who inspired you to take that next step, or it was just the whole community in?
So one of my first interactions was with this person named Umesh from the organization Jiva, and their story, I think, really moved me. They're still leading this organization called Jiva in Bangalore, doing some phenomenal work. Even recently with the whole, Karnataka government ensuring 1% of
Yeah, they're the ones behind it.
yeah, them, Sangam, and a bunch of other organizations as well. So Umesh's story really moved me because Umesh was also one of the first people who, kind of thought, okay, let me spend time and talk to this person and see how I can contribute as well. That was really inspiring, and I think after a point of time, it became the community in itself. There were various, points that came about, various milestones that happened. I think one of the first people that we got a job, her name was Madhu. She's a trans woman. And I remember that, and she had spent roughly about 2 decades of her life being involved in begging and sex work. She was, a lot into alcohol abuse, purely because of just the kind of lifestyle that she was forced into living. And about 2 decades later into her life, she had a job. And post getting that job, she was, kind of seeing herself in a very different life. Forget about how others saw her, the way she felt about herself. And she also went back to her family and performed rituals at a family function as a woman. And that meant everything to her. And I still remember the call she gave us, and she was like, Kalyan Pona, I went for the marriage and I could perform all these rituals as a woman. I could have never done that before if not for my family seeing me as just another person. I realized that the impact that we were making with the job was not just financial, but it has so many social dimensions to it as well. So many more stories like that have really impacted us.
Okay. And how did your family react? Were they supportive or a little skeptical at the beginning?
I have been blessed with a very supportive family. So I mean, I can say that in a way my mother was a little worried about, will I be able to make a career out of it? Will I be able to sustain, etc. Because it's not that I came from a very, rich family or so, right? We were we're middle class family, and we all of us kind of sustain for ourselves. But my dad was very supportive. He was like, just go all out. This is your age. You can try things out.
Yeah.
Mom was a little worried, but then I think a couple of months down, as she saw progress happening, it was fine. My siblings have been my biggest cheerleaders, helping me build my initial website, helping me manage my accounts. My brother, my sister, their guidance had really shaped me in building the first piece of Periferry. And then eventually a team and everything came about. So I was lucky enough, because otherwise you can imagine, right? Like, I mean, doing a work like this, especially as a girl, and driving something like this becomes really difficult if you don't have a supportive family.
Definitely, yeah. What were the initial days like? Did you face a lot of resistance or reluctance from the trans community itself?
Yeah, I would say that. I would say that the community was extremely heartwarming and welcoming, but in terms of believing in what we were offering, there was a lot of resistance, just because the community itself has been used and abused in so many ways for like decades right now, like whether it's socially, politically, economically.
Yeah.
Trans community has also become like this whole photo op for so many people to just come take pictures and do nothing, and just make like a whole name about it. So I remember, I mean, our initial set of field works that we had, where we'd actually go and visit door by door, my friend and I, Steve's, we would go sit over there, talk to them for hours, and then we'll tell them that, hey, there's this one employer who can give jobs. Do you know anyone who can help? And it would be a very simple language where they're just like, hey, we know nothing's going to happen, so let's just not waste each other's time. The belief was just not there.
Okay.
And fair enough. I understand why, because I don't think the society has been good enough to the community either. So it took us a lot of time to build that trust, that rapport. And it took us a lot of proving and showing results. We had to get jobs for a lot of people who then went back and spoke in the community for us to actually build that brand and that name for Periphery as a trustworthy organization. So it's been literally years of working, and to really help us get where we are today, where now the community just reaches out to us. We don't do any marketing, no field visits, nothing. Our people who have gotten jobs, about 205 people till date, they're our biggest promoters, I would say, because they have seen the impact that we've had. And yeah, and the word goes out.
So I think the first company that you were able to get them work in was Kolapasi, right?
Yeah.
So I read that how the founder of Kolapasi was already, because of the nature of the work that they were doing, were already in good terms with the transgender community.
Yeah.
But with other, like when you initially approached corporates, what was the challenges that you faced? What were their inhibitions, or were they open to hiring them?
So I think the first inhibitions, and you can imagine a bunch of 22-year-olds walking into a corporate and telling them that, hey, we provide this service, was something that a lot of companies found very hard to digest, purely because we didn't come with experience. Nobody had the experience. This was being done for the first time in the country. And second, we didn't have any proof of concept, right? We've done this with, all we could tell them that, hey, we've tried this at startups, we've tried an organization with 5 or 10,000 employees. All we had was just really, really good intentions to make things work. And that's when ANZ came about. Lucky for us that ANZ, Australia, and New Zealand Bank at that point was looking out for organizations to really help them broaden their diversity and inclusion perspective. And they actively wanted to support the trans community. So somehow they happened to find out about peripheries and they reached out to us. And that was our first ever corporate partnership that we had. We sensitized their leadership, and it was not just their India leadership, we sensitized their global leadership on what it means to be LGBTQIA in India, what is gender, what is sexuality, and why does all of this make a difference at the workplace.
Okay.
And then we got in a couple of people, we've placed them, all of whom continue to work in ANZ till date, which is roughly about 3.5, 4 years now. So that was our one of our first corporate success stories. And I think a lot of that just worked on belief. It worked on the fact that an institution wanted to make a difference, and they believed in a smaller organization that could make that change as well. So, and I think one corporate came along, that success story was good enough, and then others kind of followed the way.
That's great. They were willing to learn because often the ground realities for the queer community in India can be so different from what they would have known in the case of ANZ. They might have done research in Australia, New Zealand, but it's so different in India, right? What they face.
Yeah.
So after that, how many companies came on board? What are some of the companies that they were placed in?
So we've been actively working with about 80 odd corporates at this point, in whole different range of services. One is our awareness and learning programs. Second is creating more talent pool within the organization, which is of transgender people. Third is helping organizations build allies, through making a lot of policy change, infrastructural change, workshops, overall strategy for the organization that they can follow to actually become inclusive of the LGBT and the larger queer community. Um, some of the corporates we've been actively working with is Walmart, IBM, Accenture, ThoughtWorks. All of these organizations have been with us, journeying with us for the last 3.5, 4 years now.
Okay.
And we work with them in the capacity of a consultant, sometimes as a advisor, and sometimes in the capacity of a CSR partner, where they partner with us on our training initiatives as well. Because we're in the space of social impact, there's just no one way to solve a social issue. We have to take different approaches, and corporates have the resources, and we have the ability to kind of implement those resources as well. So yeah, that journey has been great, and I think corporate India has been playing a massive role in that space.
That's really nice to hear. Um, which has been more successful in placing them in startups or in corporates?
I would say corporates, mainly because the kind of policies that corporates are coming with, especially with the US and the UK probably headquarters, being a little ahead in terms of LGBTIQ inclusion.
Okay.
So it makes it easier for them to adapt to this change, because their policies already tell them that, hey, this should be applied across all their branches across the world. That's one thing. And I think people still think that being inclusive of LGBTQ community is a choice, or it's something that we can do or not do. And which is why they think, okay, should we allocate money and resources into working on this? Um, Corporates don't have to worry too much about that, because money and resource allocations is a bit more easier. Startups may think that, we can't spend or invest in this, but the truth is, there is no, that we can't really say no to this at this point, or because LGBTQIA people are already a part of our community, our startups, our corporates. Now all we can do is either make the community feel included by actively working on it, or we just are excluding the community at the end of the day. So yeah, I think it's been easier to work with corporates in that regard. Yeah.
Okay. Probably been instances where a certain hire failed, either from the company side or from the individual side.
Yeah.
So, what did you learn from it? Why was usually the reason when such a placement failed?
We get this question asked a lot, and especially in one of our first meetings with any new client, they would always ask us, what are some of the challenges that you face? And we tell them that, this is as normal as probably any other hire that you would make. What could be the potential reasons that any other hire drops out? Distance, pay, they're not feeling recognized, they're not moving up the ladder, etc. um, Reasons being very niche to trans persons is actually very, very less, because
That's good.
yeah, and that's really good, because there's great amount of effort that both corporates, Periphery, and the individual who's coming in puts to ensure that that difference is not there. They're entering as, just anybody else, but there is sensitivity, of course, around it. So we tell companies that, hey, don't think too much into the reason why a person may drop out. And what we've observed, and we've have about like 92% retention on an average, at least across all our jobs, which is way higher than any market standard recruitment agencies retention rates, is that companies really just need to focus on what they're doing good, because those minimal dropouts will happen any which ways.
Yeah.
And for trans community to find a safe space is so important that we've seen a lot more loyalty when a trans person finds a safe space, a safe manager, and a safe team to work with. We've seen them go really all out and actually contribute so much more to the organization. So I think trans community is a great contributor to our economy, to the corporate India. It's just time, a little time before we, as a society, even understand and recognize that.
Yeah. And you offer them training, absolutely free of cost to the transgender community, right?
Absolutely.
Do you also offer like, therapy for them in terms of, because so many of them go through so much trauma, right?
Yeah.
So do you find that, they also need like a therapist and a psychologist or, a counselor even to just help them through this new phase in their life?
Absolutely required. What we do is Periferry works with a whole range of organizations. So we don't have internal mental health support. What we do is and also because this space has so many credible mental health professionals that have been working for decades together. And Periferry could either try and build that experience or tap into the resources that already exist in the market. So we work with some of those individuals and organizations who are there and map them to our individuals seeking support. And a lot of our team members are people from the community itself who act as a resource of support for people going into different jobs as well. So, and I mean, and we're very honest that we don't think we can solve everything. So when there is an expertise in the market, we should work with them because they have the community and the experience that it needs to handle crisis interventions as well.
And do you often find a difference in the discrimination between a trans woman per se with a trans man, or even a gender non-conforming trans individual?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very interesting question and a very rightfully asked one, because there is a difference. Absolutely. You can take, for example, two trans women, and there could be one trans woman who comes with a lot more privilege, has gone through the surgery, kind of passes off as just another cisgender person. And then you can take another trans woman who may have not had that privilege, could have been into begging, sex work, socioeconomic backgrounds may be lesser, and may not pass off as much as cis.
Yeah.
The difference in treatment can be very visibly seen. They both might be treated uh, on the same levels professionally, but you can see that maybe the person who didn't come with as much privilege may not be included in the personal spaces, may not be included in the quote unquote office employee parties, etc. So there is, a lot of work that needs to go into that space because it's very, very, very deep rooted for people.
Yeah.
And people will always put off excuses that, hey, I don't mind, I am okay, but I don't know how my family will take it. I don't know if everybody else is okay. It's always easy to push off things on others instead of standing up. I think people really need to understand that you really need to see people as people. And yeah, I mean, if you get along with that person, then why not just treat them like anybody else? That's really about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also have to say that the whole understanding and the visibility of trans men community is so much more lesser. Their life, their how difficult it is to deal with patriarchy. I think trans men community really sees that every single day. Yeah, and I don't think people still understand that, because we only still see trans community as people that we see on the streets or probably begging. And that's just a small portion. That isn't the entire community itself.
Yeah. An important question I wanted to ask you was, a lot of them want to go through gender affirmation surgery or hormone replacement therapy.
Yeah.
So, do the companies have policies that enable them or support them in these medical surgeries?
Yeah.
If they want to, or they don't want to, because sometimes, the trans bill kind of forces it upon them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And not everybody has to go through it. There are people who opt to, and then there are people who may need their own time before they can even access any medical interventions. We have seen that now corporates are coming about. There are a handful of them who've been doing this for a few decades now, like organizations like IBM and Accenture have been, you know, providing these kind of policies and benefits. I won't say benefits, these kind of services to the community for almost a decade now. But then there are organizations that are just coming up now, and which is still great. I think what's important is for companies not to dictate saying that you can only get your gender affirmation surgery done, because not everybody feels dysphoric only because of their, of their genitalia or because of the surgery.
True.
People may feel highly dysphoric because of the facial hair. It can be through any specific other reasons as well. So giving trans people the liberty to work around their dysphoria how they want using that service is very important, and which I think is a whole lot more inclusive. Having access to gender neutral washrooms isn't just good for trans people, but even for everybody else in the organization. I mean, imagine you're having a family day and a father comes in with his young daughter, and a really small child for that matter. Where will he take the daughter? Will he take her to the men's restroom or the women's restroom? And for a whole lot of reasons, a lot of these policies are not just good for only trans people, but the larger society. It's just that we've only see this from the lens of we're creating some special benefits, but we're not. I mean, every gender, every section of the community has their own needs, and that's what we really do as organizations, that we serve to what the people's needs are.
Yeah. And once they are stable and financially independent, a lot of them have, the trans community relies on the system hierarchy, right? Like you mentioned in your TEDx talk, the Jamaat and Chelas.
Yeah.
It's like the guru, and the guru takes care of disciples, kind of follows that hierarchy. But do you find them breaking away from that system? They're a little more confident to be on their own?
I see this going both ways. There are Jamaat and there are Guru Chelas who are extremely supportive of each other. Gurus who really support their Chelas in really furthering their own life, working towards things that they might be ambitious about. And there are, of course, Jamaat systems that exist that are extremely exploitative, where the Gurus don't really control their Chelas' entire life. And we've seen our own, some of our trainees getting beaten up by their gurus, and it's just hostile, and it's a very it's a terrible environment to be in. It's difficult to live in an environment like that, but then we often ask and think for ourselves that where will the chela go if not for the abusive guru? Is there even any other space that exists for them?
Yeah.
So unfortunately, we've massively failed as a society to provide trans community any other safe space. When their own families don't accept, your friends are mocking you, then you live in whichever system is available for you. At least there is something that exists for you. But we have seen that once people become financially independent, they are slowly moving away, which takes a lot of courage. There is risk and there is threat to life as well. But we have seen people kind of doing that. But for uh, chelas in very abusive Jamaat systems, it's not easy to break away either, or easy to even go out and get a job. They're restricted from even those things, because a basic job can pay you maybe a 15-20,000,
Yeah.
but maybe out of begging sex work you can earn a whole lot more. So it's a very challenging situation for the young trans persons, and which is why our work becomes so much more important, to continuously reach out to the younger trans people, letting them know that organizations like these exist, and not just Periphery, so many others doing wonderful work in this space. They exist and they're here to really support as well.
I agree. So, what is your hope for Periphery going forward? Do you want to help them become entrepreneurs as well?
We do have people who reach out to us for that. That's an area that we have explored a bit, but I think we're not really looking into that at this point in time. Um, what we're really aiming for is to this become is for job creation, for skill development to really become a whole lot more driven with and for by the community. I genuinely think that organizations like Periphery don't have to exist, and that would be a win for all of us, right? I mean, the reason that we're existing is because there is a problem, there is discrimination, and there is a huge gap that exist in our society.
Yeah.
So our work is to ensure to we become redundant as soon as possible, and we can only do that if we really empower the community to just and empower as many organizations to really do and live up to this sustainably by themselves. Yeah, and then we hope that in the next 5 to 10 years we're able to achieve that as well. I mean, apart from the whole having so many training centers and creating jobs for all so many people, all of that is obviously a goal and our mission. But the larger aim is that this really becomes as normal as possible. So we don't need to be running special initiatives like these.
Well said. At the moment, are you looking to expand in other cities?
Yeah, so our aim is to ensure that we do have our training facilities come up in Chennai and Hyderabad next. So we're working on that. Currently, we do have one facility that is running. It's in partnership with ANZ and Ishtara Living. So that's running, and we're running at about a capacity of 50 people staying and getting trained and all of that happening. So hopefully, we're able to tap into a lot more in South India. And yeah, but we do have students coming from whole lot of places. So the aim is that we're able to reach across Chennai and Hyderabad as well in the next year.
Okay.
We're working with a couple of organizations to build our training capacities and infrastructure over there. So we'll be able to create jobs for a few more thousand people. And I think the more jobs we create, the more visibility that we have, the more normalized it becomes for trans people to even directly reach out to organizations and get jobs and actually be financially independent.
My last question is, there must have been a lot of hard days, right? You must have faced. What got you through a time like that?
The moment you said this, I think the first flash that came to me was the image of my team. I think a strong team, or I wouldn't call a strong team. I think people who just believe in what you believe in and are there to kind of support you even on the worst of times, because you are bound. I mean, we are bound to go through really, really, difficult days.
Yeah.
And I think that has helped. But even beyond that, I think believing and having that sort of unwavered belief is so important when you're working in the social space, and it takes everything out of you. It requires so much patience. It requires probably you being ridiculed by even the community at some point for maybe some things you may have not intention to do as well. So I think being patient, really looking at this as a long term thing, is important. So a whole lot of things, but I think a great team has helped me sail so far.
Yeah. And nothing like standing together when you have detractors.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks so much, Neelam. It was wonderful talking to you. And really, hats off on this amazing, inspiring work that you do. And like you said, hopefully there'll be a day when, an organization like Periferry becomes redundant.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. I do hope that uh, people are able to take this back and really try and be inclusive of trans persons, even in their own individual capacity. I don't think it takes much. And we may think that trans people are only here or in corporates or in certain spaces, but our own family members, our own friends could be trans people for all we know. And they might be living a very hard life in a closet. So being mindful, being open to that is very, very important. So yeah, thank you for doing what you're doing and helping us get the word out.
Yeah, definitely. And to our listeners who are looking to hire trans people, you know who to get in touch with now. So do check out periphery.com. Thank you for staying with us till the end. To stay updated on our future episodes, do follow Maharani Talks. Take care.